Welcome to OMG Reviews, and this is Real Talk, and you're here with your host, Anna Misting, and I will apologize. One has been having some technical issues, and so I was faffing about and trying to sort this thing out. But I think as well, maybe because of the topic that is for discussion today, I maybe wasn't. I'm not going to lie, I've been spoken to by a few people, and some people even suggested that I shouldn't talk about it. And I was like, no, this has been placed on my heart. This is a situation that is happening time and time again, and it is time for us to make a stand about it. So I just need some water. So, what is our topic of conversation today in OMG? Today, we are talking about our churches, the church's hidden sins. And yes, I said it. The church is supposed to be a place of sanctum. The church is supposed to be a place where if you need refuge, you can go to be safe. But unfortunately, it has often been a place of hell and a place of purgatory right here on earth. So I want to pre-warn you and give a disclaimer to you. The topic of conversation this evening will and may well trigger for some people who've experienced this type of thing. What I'm going to be talking about in no uncertain terms is the sexual and molestation abuse within our churches. And this is not a denominational thing. This is worldwide in all churches. And oftentimes we make the mistake of just assuming that it's in the Catholic Church that they have these incidences and situations that happen. Unfortunately, today, in our 21st century, in our modern times, where people should be so much more aware, and the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual abuse of anyone should be abhorred, we are still suffering with sexual molestation and abuse today in our churches. So I just want to notify you that I'm going to just be raw and real about this. This is something that has been heavy on my heart. And what saddens me is, when is there going to be accountability? When are we going to be honest, transparent, and genuine that there is a problem within our institutions and we need to do something about it? This is not something that can stay hidden. So I'm not coming from a place of hate or anger. I'm coming from a place of sadness that we are not understanding that when we do such awful and terrible things to individuals, it creates brokenness. You are more broken than the encounters that you may have had outside, because you don't expect that from the church environment. So what am I talking about? Let's just be real here. Over the past week, I am positively sure many of you on social media have been exposed to some of the news that has been going around. And my phone, my emails, everything had been blowing up, okay? And I mean blowing up. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I am, one day I just woke up to one that I was like, Lord have mercy. This is really going on too far. So let's just give you the scenario. So a week ago, on the weekend, I would say the Friday, a report of impropriety between two pastors, male and female, was actually put out. A notification by those churches was said that those pastors sadly were no longer in their office and the matter was being dealt with. So everybody from hearing that thought, oh my goodness, this is terrible. What does that mean? Then on the Sunday of the next week, we then had one of our dear sisters that was brave and strong enough to then do a live and speak out about the grooming and the sexual abuse that she encountered within our churches over, I think, about 10 years. That one created a immediate outcry because she also named the pastors that had impacted her in such a negative and derogatory way in her life. And then by the Tuesday, I got some more information about another pastor who has now been fired and arrested for indecent images and pornography of children. Do I need to keep continuing? This is in 1 week. And then by the Wednesday, Thursday, it's now reached the tabloids that this is happening within our churches. And I'm like, wow, this is an outcry. And remember, we're already going through a pandemic. So what does this mean? When we are already closed and these things are being exposed, what was happening when the doors were open and we were integrally going on? I'm being attacked by a fly and I can't stand creatures. Sorry. What? Now that when the churches were open, how then were these things happening and nobody was aware? Why? Because it's our churches' hidden sins. We are continually hiding wrongdoing within the churches. It doesn't matter what denomination. We have a hush-hush clergy boy system that anything that is negative that happens, we don't discuss it. We will move and relocate the perpetrator, but we do not deal with the issue at hand. That is wrong. And what we do is we then attack the victims who often, through the grace of God, take a stand to say something. And oftentimes when a victim stands, you don't know the hell they've had to go through internally, what they've experienced in that area before they can actually say, this is what has happened to me, knowing full well that 9 out of 10 times they are not supported. Shame on us. We should be embarrassed by such a thing. It's unacceptable. So let's look further into this and how we can make real change so that when our places of worship do open, and that's any denomination, and I mean mosque, synagogue, church, anywhere, we can have genuine, safe space environments so that people can feel safe. And if there is an incident, they will not feel that they cannot speak out about it, because that is unacceptable. So, I don't know. I'm sure many of you have seen and read some of the things, but the one that really caught me, which was so sad, is then there was a big letter and a petition put out with regards to what had happened. And with our dear sister, and I don't think she will mind me telling you a bit more about it because we have spoken. Now, it goes on to say that pastors, teachers, conference office workers concerned about the tyrannical, tone deaf and out of touch and misogynistic and secretive leadership of this individual conference. And then it goes on to talk about how they've allowed the pastors who have done these wrongs to still be preaching on their pulpits. Why is that? The men should be barred. It's now making us look like a laughing stock. And that while an investigation is taking place, they should not be allowed to hold their office. Kind of makes sense. Because if you've done some, in a way, I've sort of seen in some kind of comparative way, the same thing we're having with police brutality and that blue line system, where they know that they will not be held accountable if they do harm or kill someone of an ethnic background other than Caucasian. It's the same thing I'm noticing happening in our churches, that if a pastor, minister, vicar, priest does something of sexual abuse and molestation or rape, instead of them being held accountable, they are relocated, moved somewhere else, hush, hush, but really nothing genuinely has been done. And I'm just looking at this over the ages, because this is not the first time this has happened. And it says they've proven that they have no intention of handling this with the sensitivity needed. They are past their prime and are embarrassing all of us. Then it goes on to show you videos, and all you have to do is put their names into social media to see the anger that is taking place nationwide. So things are getting heated and out of hand. Why? Because it's being seen that we are not acting when something is wrong. It then goes on that, you know, the men mentioned in the video after the heartbreaking confession, all of these men were recommended to that conference by another pastor, and the other conferences that they came from fired them because of poor pastoral ethics. So we're now brought here, and it's a fact that, you know, it's instrumental that the pastors in their new conference are covering them up. And then it then goes on to say that there is more knowledgeable that many of the pastors in these conferences are notorious for being womanizers. They've got victims in 3 states, and they've got women that are willing to, who gave their names and are willing to come forward to witness and testify that they have been assaulted by these men. This is amazing, you know, but it's not amazing. The reason why it's not amazing, because first and foremost, we're all sinful human beings. And that's the reality. There's no sin greater than the other. That's what God has said. But the reality of it is, when you are in a position of authority and a position of trust, where people are looking to you for wisdom, for guidance on how to live their daily lives, you have a duty of care to safeguard your parishioners. That's the bottom line. There's no excuses. And if you do not know how to manage yourself, then you need to not be in that position. You need to step down and let others lead if you are not able to do your job in the capacity of being a good shepherd and not a beast or a wolf. So let's look into this as we go forward. And, you know, I want to read you some stats and get you to understand clearly what is going on. Okay, the international extent of this issue is worldwide, global. People are being sexually abused and molested all over the world. It's not personal. It happens even more so in countries where women, sadly, and young people are not recognized as equals. But where you're supposed to be seen as an equal, especially if you're in the, you know, the Catholic Christian remit, you shouldn't be having these issues. But we are. Why is that? Sexual violence. What is consent? Because I think some people are confused. Grooming. We don't look and understand the context of grooming. The now why these things are being exposed is because of media coverage, and we debate over the causes as to why this happens and not trying to make sure that we find the solutions to eliminate the problem. And then we have the issue of blaming the victims. And the popular culture in our churches is to put it under the rug and hide it. If we just close our eyes, it may go away. It won't. I'm sorry. That will not happen. We have to act accordingly to deal with the situation. So, sexual violence is an unwanted sexual act or activity. I just don't think I can make it any clearer than that as to what it is. But let's break it down. There are many different kinds of sexual violence, including but not restricted to rape, sexual assault, child sexual abuse, sexual harassment, rape within marriage, relationships, forced marriage, so-called honor-based violence, female genital mutilation, trafficking, sexual exploitation, and ritual abuse. Sexual violence can be perpetrated by a stranger or by someone known and even trusted, such as a friend, colleague, family member, partner, or an ex-partner. Sexual violence can happen to anyone. No one ever deserves or asks for it to happen. And 100% of the responsibility for any act of sexual violence lies with its perpetrator. There is no excuse for sexual violence. It can never be justified. It can never be explained away. And there is no context in which it is valid, understandable, or acceptable. If you have been raped or experienced any kind of sexual violence, male or female, no matter where you are, what you are doing, what you are wearing, what you were saying, even if you were drunk or under the influence of drugs, it was not your fault and you did not deserve this. So what are some of the statistics in this arena? 20% of women and 4% of men have experienced some type of sexual assault since the age of 16, equivalent to 3.4 females and 631,000 male victims. 3.1% of women, 510,000, and 0.8% of men, 108,000, aged 16 to 59, had experienced sexual assault in the last year. So in 2017 to 2018, that's a humongous amount of people being violated. And then it was put in January 2013, an overview of sexual offending, the first ever joint official statistics bulletin on sexual violence released by the Ministry of Justice, the National Statistics on the Home Office. Approximately 85,000 women and 12,000 men aged 16 to 15 experienced rape, attempted rape, or sexual assault by penetration in England and Wales alone every year. And only around 15% of those experienced sexual violence report it to the police. Approximately 90% of those who are raped know the perpetrator prior to the offense. This is mind-blowing. Hold on, I need some water. So one of the misconceptions that I find that we are having today is about the matter of grooming. And this is more so the case in our churches. It is much easier to perpetrate and do a wrong to someone once you have groomed them. And that's exactly what Danielle explained in her video when she talked about being groomed. When someone builds an emotional connection with a young person or adult to gain their trust, this trust is later used to keep that young person or adult in a sexual relationship, as well as to keep them from sharing it with anyone else. Some of the signs of sexual exploitation, which were people that is low self-esteem, sexualized behavior, language, unexplained presence, known to be sexually active. Evidence of suspicion of substance misuse, leaving home care without permission, entering or leaving unknown vehicles, significantly older boyfriend or girlfriend, frequenting parties, going missing or returning late, sexting, low attendance at school, change in appearance, secretive and internet mobile phone use. So once someone has groomed you, this is often what happens to you. You start to encounter these. Now, I wanted to I actually do have the grooming triangle and how it actually works. I should have actually put that on a slide. I apologize. But it's a bit like this. I don't know if you guys can see it here, but I'll tell you what it is. It's maintaining control. So first of all, actually, let me do it in the right order. You target the person that you want to have the sexual encounter with. Then once you've gained that young person or adult's trust, you then fill a need. So there is a reason why you have been, the door has been opened for you to groom, because that person had a need that you have said you can fill. Then you isolate the young person or adult. How and why? Because now you want to gain them to yourself so they cannot tell the wrong that you are doing to them. Then you sexualize the relationship. So that hasn't happened yet. Remember, you target the person, they gain the trust of the individual, they feel the need for the individual, they then isolate the individual, and that's when they start sexualizing the relationship. This is a planned, targeted system, grooming, and then they maintain control, oftentimes by shaming, by saying that they're going to expose and putting people in real torturous, difficult situations. So who are our perpetrators? Who would do such a thing? Okay. Who are the perpetrators of, child sexual abuse and abuse? Those who molest children look and act just like everyone else. There are people who have or will sexually abuse children in churches. That's the first place that came up. Schools and youth sports leagues. Abusers can be neighbors, friends, and family members. People who sexually abuse children can be found in families, schools, churches, recreation centers, youth sports leagues, and any other place that children gather. Significantly, abusers can be and often are children. About 90% of children who are victims of sexual abuse know their abuser. And 12 to 13, only 10% of sexually abused children are abused by a stranger. Approximately 30% of children who are sexually abused are abused by a family member. The younger the victim, the more likely it is that the abuser will be a family member. But once they reach to 13 and over, it is often outside of the home. I just don't know if you're hearing these statistics. About 60% of children who are sexually abused are abused by people the family trusts. And that's why it happens in our churches. Homosexual individuals are no more likely to sexually abuse children than a heterosexual individual. And most oftentimes, it's heterosexuals that abuse more so. So, how do we, because there's this argument, especially when it's an adult, determine consent? She was an adult, she knew what she was doing, she must have not, how could she not know, blah, blah, blah. What do you mean, how could she not know? When you're being groomed, when someone is taking advantage of you and you're being violated, you don't know. That's just the reality. So how do we determine consent? To determine if someone is giving consent, you must be able to answer two questions. Does the person want to give their consent? Is the person capable of giving consent? The easiest way to determine if a person wants to give consent is to simply ask. This eliminates the uncertainty of guessing and trying to interpret signals. Someone putting his or her hand on your hand might be a way of indicating that he or she likes what you are doing. Or it could be a way of indicating that he or she would like you to stop. The only way to be sure is to ask. And I love this video that I've got here because it just is quite clear on what consent is. So you should not be confused.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, You're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat, going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
I mean, you just can't get clearer than that, really. It's clear. What is consent? So, in light of what's been happening, how can we, as a body of people, feel that it is okay to condemn and blame and shame someone who has been so honest with us and said, this is my story? So what is the current legal definition of sexual and indecent assault? A person who A, commits an offense if he intentionally or she touches another person. The touching is sexual, that the B does not consent to the touching, and A does not reasonably believe that B consents. There is a blurry line on that area, but I really do feel, especially in our churches, we don't need to be confused about that factor. I think it's quite clear. We have it in a biblical standpoint. Unless you are having any form of intimacy with your spouse, you are not to have it. I don't see how that's confusing. Unless you are legally married to that individual, you have no right to be touching that person. That's very clear and not confusing. So why are we having issues time and time again regarding sexual abuse and molestation within our churches? I'm telling you now, it makes no sense to me. We are having failures to disclose. Why? Because people are scared. They are scared that if they say something in the church, they will be seen as a home wrecker, damaging the great pastor or the bishop or the clergy. Why is it that, there's a culture in our churches that it's male dominated, and, to go and say and talk about or say that this male person has done you wrong, you'll have to go and report it to another male. Well, you're not going to be comfortable to do that because you've been victimized by a male, and to go and report it to another male who may be friends or colleagues with that male, you're not going to want to disclose that. So you will stay in silence. You should not have to do that. That's not Christian. That's not Judaism. That's not Islam. That is not Hinduism. It's not anything. Oh, let me not forget Buddhism. I do like my Buddhist. It's not anything if you are supposed to be in a church or spiritual environment. That's supposed to be the safest place on the planet, not the most heinous and dangerous. So how are we finding out about all of this stuff? Because of the media coverage, the exposure of abuse is being highlighted now, even more so, especially in this pandemic, due to a wider variety of media and online coverage. People now can actually film the indecent act. Some people actually do film it because they record it and they send it round. Sometimes it's been a gang situation where they film them having these indecent sexual violent scenes with the victim, and then they send it out. And that alone puts the victim in such a state of dilemma that they won't report it because they are so ashamed and they did nothing wrong. Then, of course, you have, online and all other ways of how we are being exposed and knowing more about what is going on. This is scary times to me anyway. So one of the things that drives me crazy is the popular culture that we have in our churches and in denominations of blaming and shaming the victim, but protecting the perpetrator. I'm confused. I am really confused. Someone has been done wrong. We make them the issue, and we protect the person who has done the wrong. I mean, I don't know how about you, but that's just so wrong to me. At the end of the day, someone being abused is wrong. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know the churches, especially now, have really started to come up with this terminology of, being first lady and all this kind of stuff. And I just want to just break that myth down now. If you desire to be the first lady, that is, and I'm saying it right now, that is of Lucifer. Let me explain why. Lucifer wanted to be the first in heaven before Jesus. He was twisted. And remember, he was so powerful, he took a third of heaven with him. Everything that Lucifer does, and then he's now Satan here on earth, is about being first. It's about me, being in the limelight, doing whatever. If you want to be that first lady, you need to be humble. You need to be serving. You need to be giving. You need to be kind. And you allow the people around you to elevate you, not you desiring it in your mind. Because once you do what is right, that will be seen. Your light will be seen. And so what happens is oftentimes our wives of the perpetrators know that their husbands are out of order. But what do? They cover up. They protect their husbands. I've even had a conversation with some young people that they know that their father is actually an abuser and has abused their friends that they have brought home. But for fear of being abused themselves, they've allowed their friend to be abused to protect themselves. You see that scenario? That's a sick, sad situation. And the one that is the most hurtful to me is the one where a young person or a woman who is scared for their siblings or a younger brother or sister from experiencing the abuse will take abuse and receive the abuse to protect the other. We should not be having those scenarios in our places of worship. It is unacceptable. It is time for us to stand up, and that's all, and be held accountable. And that's why I say it's the hidden sins in our churches. It's our churches. It's our places of worship. We are at fault. There is no one that I know that should be, I would say, under the age of 60 that is not aware or has not been exposed to someone having some form of sexual violence or abuse. And that's sad. But every single one of us is aware of someone that has experienced it. Now, God forbid it's in the church, but that's where it takes place. So that means all of those, it doesn't matter what it is that they have for children. And they say the age range, as I said, is from 13. It does happen younger, but oftentimes it's from 13, the age of 13. And definitely it's up under 16. It's classed as child abuse and child sexual molestation. But over 16, it's then sexual abuse, sexual violence, and molestation, because you are seen as having much more mental capacity and you are in better of a position to say no. And when someone says no of 16 and above and it's not been listened to, then you are abusing them in that capacity. So that's not child molestation or sexual abuse. The same goes for rape. It's just the thought of someone being raped in a spiritual or worship setting is so damaging. It's damaging because it is breaking people. People are not only leaving our churches in droves, but they're also being broken and not even able sometimes to function in their daily lives. And that's because they went to a place of worship and have been broken. Emotionally, mentally, and physically, and spiritually destroyed. We need to be accountable. There is no longer any reason for excuse for this kind of behavior. And I'm saying none. And just in case some of you are confused, because I've done on domestic violence, but what is the types of abuse? We have physical, we have sexual, we have emotional, we have psychological, we have financial, and there's also digital abuse, because we are in that age. How is it that this is being allowed to continue unchecked in our churches? Oftentimes, let's go on sexual, it will be rape and or sexual assault, unwanted kissing, touching, unwanted rough or violent sexual activity, sexual contact, when you could be emotionally distraught because of death or trauma, drunk, drugged or unconscious, constant sexual insults, and the last one, which I'm hoping would not be in a place of worship, would be forced prostitution. The emotional impact and the psychological impact is detrimental. You're humiliating you, you're feeling shamed, you believe that you are at fault. And this is where it goes to, again, that popular culture of we blame and we shame the victim. That is unacceptable. There is no way that someone has actually taken the courage to come out and say, I have been violated. And we say to them, no, you're lying. No, that person wouldn't do that. No, that person is a good man. No, you are a nasty, you're wicked, you're evil, and we just shut them down. And we crush them. Do you know the courage it took for them to speak out? Do you know the courage that it takes to actually voice and say, I have been violated? Do you know it takes you years sometimes before you can even acknowledge it yourself that you've been violated? This is not something to be swept under the rug. This is something that needs to be addressed now. We need to take a stand as a people, man, woman, and child. We need to take a stand. We cannot any longer hide these kinds of acts and abusive situations. I am so proud of the women who have chosen right now to stand up and air their voice. As for me, I have never experienced sexual abuse in my church environment. And I give God thanks for that, because maybe, especially of the mindset that I have now, I would have committed a felony. But sadly, I've experienced sexual abuse as a child. And my sexual abuse did not stop until I was 14. And then I experienced domestic violence as a teenager and in my early 20s. So once again, I was a broken woman, or a broken young person, and then a broken woman, until many years later when I was freed of such bondage, of one thinking it was my fault, of one thinking that, there's something about me and I didn't do it right, or maybe it's my fault, or, just putting all the blame on myself. Not wanting to say anything because I didn't want to bring shame on the family. Not wanting to say anything because I didn't want anyone to know that I was experiencing this, because it's such a degrading and disgraceful thing. But I can tell you this right now. In some ways, I wish I had spoken about it sooner, because when you speak out about it, yes, it frees you, but it also, which is crazy, will free the perpetrator. Because do you know that oftentimes the perpetrator also is guilty and knows when they've done wrong? That's why they're always begging you to forgive them, to come back, but then they go back into the cycle because you haven't shut them down. You haven't been open about it, and they haven't been held accountable. Once you start to expose this mess, a whole different form of culture will be built. If you know that when you do something wrong, even as a child, you do something wrong, you're going to suffer the consequences. You were told you could only have 4 cookies and you had 6. Now the consequences will be either you don't get no cookies tomorrow or you only get 2. Either way, there is a consequence. And I'm just using that as an example. But in situations like this, you need to know, if I harm this young woman or this young girl or this young boy, the consequences are so consequential that it's not worth it. So when I thought about it, I removed that from my mind, because I know what I will lose and what will be exposed. But if I know I can do the harm to that young woman, to that young boy, to that child, and I know it will be hidden, and I'll just maybe be moved to another location. That's a good one. Oftentimes we just move the perpetrator to another location. Then we won't have any change in our system. We have got to make a stand about this now. And I may be just one of the lone people in the wilderness that will be willing to stand up and say, stop the violence, the sexual abuse in our churches now. It is not right. It is not of Christ. And we need to get back to true, authentic, genuine places, safe space environments of worship. Right now, we're in a pandemic and many churches are closed. And that's the case right now. And some people might be feeling safer because they're not having to go through a church door. That is a shame and downright outcry. I can remember sometimes in one of my churches that I've been a member of, and there's a stairwell that if you come in the parking lot from you go into church from the downstairs from the parking lot, you go up those stairs and the men would be standing at the bottom, and they claim they're greeting you and they're deacons and whatever, but they're watching the women as they go up the stairs in all their Sunday and Sabbath finery, watching them lustingly as they go up the stairs, making lewd comments and saying stuff. And one of my friends was so shaken up by it and was so disturbed. And I said to her, we have to say something. But again, she was like, no, I don't want to make a fuss. I don't want to, create a scene. Let's just leave it. No, we should have said something. Because we didn't say something, it happened again, and it kept happening. Because we said nothing. Now, if we'd have said something, that would have been shut down. And women could have walked up that stairwell without feeling insecure of being assaulted visually as well as verbally, and maybe even being touched. At the end of the day, we have got to make a stand for change. So I stand with all the women and men that are choosing not to condone sexual abuse, molestation, or violence in our churches. I don't want to go to church and have to hear that the pastor that I thought was giving me a word is a pervert or is a sexual predator. And the sad thing is, because you've got access to, lonely or sick or hurting or broken souls, you've taken advantage of those individuals. You are a sexual predator and you are out of order. And that's why your sins are being exposed. And the sad thing is, it's blackening the church's names because you're a part of that church. That's just not the way how life is supposed to go. Once again, you were placed in that role of authority to lead and guide and support and just be the good shepherd. If you know in your heart that you don't have that capacity, you need to step down and find another job. You should not be anybody's pastor, bishop, minister, vicar, rabbi, whatever, if you cannot manage your sexual urges. And listen, we're human beings. And that's where I come, where the churches need to offer proper counseling, sexual support, especially maybe if a pastor could be single or whatever, so that they have this arena where they can deal with that and not feel like they have to now prey on members, because that's what's going on. Okay, that is what is going on. Okay, someone says, I don't think people are protecting the perpetrators. Rather, they strive to keep it quiet and not bring the name of the church into disrepute, which is still wrong. And you know what? That's true too. That is true too. I agree with that. We don't want to make it sound like our church has a problem. No, not in our church. We will look at another denomination and we will say, oh, terrible, terrible, awful. But we don't have that here. Scratch that. Sexual abuse and molestation is in every denomination. I am so sorry to hurt your feelings. It doesn't matter if you're Lutheran, Mormon, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal, Catholic, Jewish, Islamic, whatever you are. As I said, Buddhist, Sikh, Hindu, it happens in every single faith-based denomination. And that is because we are all sinful, but that is also because we don't hold people in leadership roles accountable. This is the time when you need to take those people to court. You need to out them. And we know that these organizations and denominations have, what would I say? They have policies and procedures of how these things are supposed to be done. Yes, of course they do. But then because we don't want to expose our mess, we somehow seem to manage to manipulate and just put it under the carpet. How are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Because then, like it is with racial matters, when you stay silent, your silence is actually perpetrating just as much as the perpetrator. Your silence is like a condonement of what is going on. And I know there are some people who are scared, and that's why we need to have safe space places for them. People need to feel safe that they can speak out about this mess. It is not right. It is not fair. And it sure is not, if you are a Christian, Christ-like. When I look at the life of Jesus, he was, Mary Magdalene, she was supposed to have been an adulteress, this, whatever. He asked her, where are your accusers? She said, there are none. They've gone. Well, get up and go and sin no more. Now, I know we mess up. And you may mess up. But the first thing to be repentant, sorry, and to overcome those urges is for you to acknowledge that you have them, and then to seek help and to remove yourself from positions of power so you do not abuse and harm another victim. For those of us who have been victims, find someone that you know that you can trust, that has your back, that will be non-judgmental, that will support you. Seek counseling, seek professional counseling. And the sad thing is, when you've been abused by your faith-based institution, you're not going to want to deal with that institution again. You are then just going to maybe want to just keep away from any kind of faith-based organization. But please, the best way to heal that broken heart is to give all those pieces to Jesus. And it sounds cliche, but until you release that hurt, release that pain, free yourself from the condemnation that people maybe even have put on you, but you believe in yourself, you will never be able to heal, and you will never be able to be free. You have done nothing wrong. Sexual abuse is not your fault. And it's your time to heal. Heal now. Speak out. Do not keep it inside anymore. Talk about it. Even if you have to put it in writing to somebody, but put it out there and don't hold this anymore, and be in fear of a perpetrator. And to those of you in authority, do better. It is better for you to act on what has been said and to find out it is not true than to not act on what has been said and it is true. Because you then have condoned that sexual, abusive, molestative action. It's time to shut this down. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, male or female. You do not have to be in an abusive situation in silence. And you know what? I'm not even being funny. You see the fact that it's in a spiritual or faith-based environment? You need to out their backsides even more. You need to actually just put it on blast. Why? Because they should know better. They should be held accountable. Because when they go in training for these things, these are some of the areas that they're taught about that they can face in a family that they are supposed to be able to support and guide and assist you. You're not doing that if you're the perpetrator. And now you have a string of victims in different states or countries or locations. No. So let's all hold our leaders to account. You have to do better. I mean, a prime example, so many accusations have been made about the president of the United States, but it's okay. He's still the president. If a crime has been committed, churches should report it to the police. Yes, they should. What do church leaders know about investigating crimes? I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but that is true. You are so right. They have no clue about investigating crimes. But one of the reasons why they don't is because, like you said, they're scared. They don't want it to be known about their church. They want to keep it private. They want to hide that. We don't want to be known as the denomination that has these issues. We got those issues. In 1 week, people, 3 issues were exposed. That's in 1 week. Could you imagine the catalyst that has been happening over the past few years? Not few years, centuries. So it's time for us to stop, hold our leaders to account, be supportive of the victims, and stop the foolishness. You know, I'm an advocate for this type of thing. You know, I work with women and young people in domestic violence. Sexual abuse. And of course, because I can relate, because I've experienced it, you know, and, you know, we talk about as well, especially if it's an abusive relationship, and why did you allow it to happen over so many years? Fear. Oftentimes the perpetrator puts you in fear. Sometimes your family is threatened, your life is threatened, you know, and you have to be willing to take the chance that you could die. Your career could die. It doesn't always have to be your immediate life. You could die. Your career could die. You could be trying to do something or get somewhere, but because of this sexual molestation and everything, you are now told by an employer or anything, or even by a church member, if you say something, this is what's going to happen. You'll never be able to work or do something in this area again. I will make sure that your life is difficult. That's a mess. You know, then you have mothers that sometimes don't want to accept what is happening in their household. So again, it could be their husband. It could be, you know, a brother. And you just don't want to let it be known and accept that someone could be harming your children. We can't live like that anymore, people. We can't. We cannot live like this anymore. We have to stop this sexual abuse, molestation, and violence in our faith-based institutions. Otherwise, what is the point? Where is the safety and the sanctum that you should find in this environment? You should be going to your faith-based environment because you want to be saved, you want to be healed, and you want to be able to live in your best life. How can you do that if you are being abused by the same system that you have gone to for help? Come on, people. We've got to stop this now. We have to. We have to stop this now. So I've been there with you, talking, telling you definitely how I feel. I mean, you've heard me. I'm not even on my soapbox today. I just, I've got so much evidence, and especially because, this is a field that I've worked in, I have so much statistics and information on, the abuse and things that we face. But then when it came out again into our church and our denomination, I was like, whoa, okay, it's bad enough when you work outside, but to think that my faith-based institutions got this mess going on, no. This has to stop now. No, this has to stop. And so let me just leave with this. Known offenders, 5 things to know. Okay. And this is taken from Grace, the godly response to abuse in the Christian environment. Could you imagine we have to have these type of organizations? This is a mess. Hazard signs help us warn about dangerous situations. They remind us to stay extra vigilant and alert while navigating or approaching treacherous terrain. While it is unfortunate there are not flashing lights or hazard signs in our churches, there are warnings that communities can heed when navigating issues around known offenders. Studies show that sexual offenders who operate within churches typically have more sexual offense convictions, more victims, and younger victims. Some offenders will operate in the dark and have hundreds of victims before they ever get caught by authorities. But offenders are not always hiding in secret. Sometimes churches are made aware of an offender's past crimes, and in these situations, what should the faith community do when a known offender requests to become a part of your faith community months, years, or even decades after their crimes were committed? When it comes to evaluating and making decisions about known offender policies and practices, church leaders need to educate themselves, consult abuse experts and survivors, and formulate a safeguarding plan. Doing otherwise compromises a church's ability to protect the vulnerable. We've consulted with our team of experts, and here are just a few important tips so you can become more aware and better equipped to help keep your church community safe. Know the pain and trauma of survivors. Abuse and sexual maltreatment are enormously evil acts. No offender should be allowed to attend services with anyone they have victimized. So no, pastors, you cannot go back on the pulpit if you have been an abuser. Post-traumatic stress disorder is common among abuse survivors, and each faith community must be sensitive not to re-traumatize those who have already been victimized. Leaders must understand that the presence of a sex offender in corporate gatherings such as the worship and programs could re-traumatize other survivors who are present. Importantly, abuse survivors in the church must know that your faith community prioritizes their protection, healing, and growth. In addition to addressing known offenders, faith communities must demonstrate a vibrant and robust commitment to safeguarding children, adults, and young people. Dedication through resources and energy to a holistic ministry to serve survivors of abuse, and a commitment to stand against the evils of abuse in all of its forms. Education about the dynamics of abuse, awareness, and prevention should happen at all levels of church life, such as in regular public teaching, community-wide training, and discipleship ministry. Know the experts. Pastors and church leaders should never work alone in addressing and assessing known offenders within the church community. First, leaders are strongly encouraged to know about sexual offenders such as predators. Second, leaders should seek the consultation of experts who have experience in dealing with sexual offenders, such as former prosecutors, sexual abuse investigators, and child protection advocates. Without close relationships with experts who have substantiated experience in dealing with sexual offenders, a pastor or community can make grievous decisions that may unintentionally wound a survivor and make other victims. Know the strategies of abusers. Many sex offenders find faith communities and Christians easy to manipulate. And Dr. Anna Salter documented how one convicted sex offender, who was himself a minister, shared, "I consider church people easy to fool. They have a trust that comes from being Christians. They seem to want to believe in the good that exists in all people. Offenders often have lifelong patterns of manipulation and deception." Child protection expert Victor Vyeth states it in this way: "Men and women who sexually abuse children or young people are also master liars who manipulate not only their victims, but also parents, churches, and communities into believing their crimes are not particularly erroneous or have even the fault of the victim." Common manipulative strategies of offenders can include minimizing the abuse. Oh my gosh, that was a long time ago. It was just one incident. Or misusing scripture to solicit their forgiveness. Rationalizing the abuse, claiming to be a new person, "I'm not a danger anymore," or use biblical language to express their change. Wow, this is just, and blaming the victim or other causes such as stress, the marriage was breaking down, or even alcoholism as to why they are a perpetrator. These and other manipulative strategies reveal an unrepentant offender. Unrepentant offenders should not be welcomed into any faith-based organization. Trained professionals and pastors should be sharing notes and insights. The more isolated a pastor or community is when interacting with known offenders, the more exposed they become to manipulation and the grooming strategies of those pastors or leaders. Know your limits. There is no quick or easy way for offenders to undo lifelong patterns of manipulation and destructive behavior. Most serious studies show that there is no known way to convert pedophiles into non-pedophiles. So working with known offenders means descending into darkest of valleys. Many faith communities are ill-equipped to include known offenders within their congregation. It is not a sign of weakness to admit your faith community needs more education and help to ensure that children and young people and women are safe as you navigate these critical issues related to offenders. Know the right questions. Often churches struggle to ask the most important questions. Should child sexual offenders be around children? How can I know if this offender is telling me the truth? Are there any ways to know if the offender is not repentant? What safety measures should be in place to protect children when they are not on church property? Does the church community need to be informed about the identity of a sexual offender? And get an organization that is known for offender response training. These are some deep, dark times, people, and we need to be aware of what we can and cannot do and the implications. So I appreciate you all listening and spending time. For those of you that will see this later, and as I said, please, for those of you who have maybe experienced it, it could be a trigger. But this is your time now to speak up and speak out. It's time to rise up and reach out so that you no longer have to be in such an abusive situation. I am sorry that you have encountered this. I'm sorry to all of the victims out there that have experienced this. We have got to do better, people. I am taking on responsibility as well, that if I am going to be there to support, encourage, and be there, and even just a listening ear, that safe space person that you could communicate with, and then guide you and signpost you to an organization that can help you with what you need. We can't be scared anymore because this stuff has to stop. So thank you guys for listening. I appreciate all of you that have participated. I'm asking you not to be angry at the church, but to be angry at the perpetrator. But be sad that the churches haven't learnt and don't know how to manage these situations better. And that's what we need to do. Help them out. Let them start to be accountable and start accepting that we have to do better. So, thank you all for listening. And next week, we will be talking on another topic that is actually quite, how can I put it? Let's put it like this. The topics that we're going to be talking about over this next month are going to be real. They will have some impact on an individual who hears them because you would have experienced it. Let's put it like that. But these are things that we need to discuss. These are things that we need to talk about. So if there's anything that you would like me to talk about, that you want us to discuss, that you want to share, if you want to come on and, I know this conversation here, this topic, there were a few people that said, well, no, I don't think I want to talk about that. And that's okay. But if you want to be able to share and, tell your story, then please let me know so that I can be there to support you and guide you through and give you that voice, that platform that you need so you can speak out about it. Wellness Wednesdays, as you know, I do Wellness Wednesdays, and the Wellness Wednesdays, we will be talking a little bit more about this situation. So tune in on Wellness Wednesdays. The time, I'm sorry again because of technical issues, but it's going to be 9 o'clock GMT time, and it's 4 p.m. Eastern, and that's 1 p.m. PST, so Central Time. So guys, have a really awesome week, and thank you so much for listening, and stay blessed, guys, and stay safe. Okay, stay safe, not only to do with our pandemic and COVID, but stay safe and look after your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.